This will be the third tutorial on the online trainer, and in this tutorial we're going to continue on. In the first one we covered controls basics. In the second one we talked a little bit about the avionics panel, the OBS, the CDI, how all that works. In this particular tutorial we're going to quickly cover the settings that are available. So just reviewing, if you click on the Home tab, that shows you the basic plane instruments. On the settings page, what there are is you can set position and by latitude and longitude. I wouldn't recommend it. It's easier to click on the map. You can also set your magnetic variation. That's not terribly useful either. But here is a useful setting where you can set the heading to whatever you want it to be. So you can put the airplane in various situations. So in this particular case, let's say we wanted a heading at 270. If we set it to that, we come over here, we can see that the plane is now flying on a heading of 270 away from the Ithaca VOR. We can adjust altitude. Say I wanted to be at 2,000 instead of 3,000. I could do that, and we see the altimeter now indicates 2,000. This becomes useful later on when setting up for training scenarios where you're using an ILS, where altitude is actually useful on this particular trainer. The other setting that is somewhat useful is tracking. And if we go back here, what we'll see on the map, I'm going to speed the airplane up. I'll give it full power, pitch down just a little bit. And what you can see over here on the map is a little line where the airplane has been and is going. That is useful for when you're actually doing procedures. If you want to see a procedure turn or your holds or something like that, it will give you an idea how well that's working. So it just draws a line where the plane is going. What also we have on settings is a show radial switch here. And what that does is it shows the radial away from the VOR. So we see here we have an OBS setting of 360. We see the radial going outbound at 360. If I want to move the OBS over, we can see that it's moving. We actually have two lines here because both nav aids are set to the Ithaca VOR. So that we have one at 360 for nav 2 and one at about 060 for nav 1. If I wanted to tune to another location, say Binghamton, I'd tune it, I'd switch it to active, I'd ID it, and now what we will see if we go down and find Binghamton is that the second nav aid is showing this 360 degree radial, and if we rotate the OBS it will rotate around just like that. So that can be useful for training purposes, just to indicate where the radial actually is. The other useful setting here is, let me reset this. If I just reload the page, it resets everything back to where it started. The other one here is wind. Say I put a wind out of the east and I want it strong so that I can show the effect of the wind. So I'll put a wind at 090 at 30 knots. And if I go back to the home page, make sure I turn on tracking as well. If I go back to the home page, we were going northbound and we were on more or less the 360 degree radial. What we can see here is we're close to the VOR obviously, but we've gotten quite a ways off track. What you'll see over here on the map with the tracking is that because we have a 30 knot wind coming from the right, it's blowing us quite a bit left of course. So I'm going to just let that go for a little bit until we've got a little bit of distance from the VOR. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come around and probably intercept that 360 degree radial again by turning to the right and establishing an intercept angle. And I'm going to go pretty sharp here. I'm going to go about 45 degrees even though we're close to the VOR, just to make things speed up a little bit. So there's about a 45 degree intercept, and what we should see is the needle coming back to center. As it does that, I want to start a left hand. As it gets close, I'm going to start a left hand turn. And what I'm looking for is the needle to sort of slow down and stop moving. Once it does that, I'm going to go level, reset my heading bug, and sort of watch what's happening. And what it looks like is happening is we still are a little bit too far to the right. So I'm going to take a little bit of that out. Maybe go to about 020 or just slightly less. Set the heading bug. And what we see here is the needle has more or less stopped moving. We can fine-tune it all we want. In the real world, you're constantly adjusting for these kinds of things. But what we see here is we are now roughly tracking outbound. We're going on the 360 degree radial straight north, but we have a wind correction angle of 20 degrees in there. So we're flying a heading of 020 to maintain a northerly track on the 360 degree radial. The other thing that's useful about wind is I'm going to reset this back to 0. The other thing that's useful about a wind setting is if you want to practice detecting wind, what you can do is click on random wind. It won't show you what the wind is. We'll go back to this page and we'll see kind of what happens here. And we're too close to the VOR right now to make any kind of determination, so what we'll do is we'll fly outbound. And unfortunately, in this case, it doesn't look like we have much of a crosswind at all. That's the problem with random, is it may not do what you want it to do. But what it kind of looks like to me is we have a slight, the wind seems to be blowing us a little bit, well, not really at all. What I say is we go back and it looks like it's almost it's either weak or it's a direct headwind or a direct tailwind, more or less. And sure enough, it's a direct headwind. What I can do is just reset the random and go here. Now what we see is the wind is blowing us off to the left of course. So what we think now is maybe the wind's coming from the right hand side. We want to correct for that. So just start banking till the trend goes back in the opposite direction. We'll re-intercept, so we're going to go a little bit too far. And as it comes into center, we're going to bank back in the opposite direction slowly, and it looks like somewhere right about there we'll keep that needle steady. We're not quite centered. So I'll set the heading bug for that. So that's close, and what it looks like is we're flying north. We don't have any indication of ground speed here yet. That will be a future feature. But this ground speed effect of wind would be important on something like an ILS. If your ground speed is high, you have to descend quicker. If it's low, you have to descend slower. We'll get to that in another tutorial. But what we have here is it looks like about a 16-degree wind correction angle to the right is giving us a track of 360 out of Ithaca. And if we go back to the settings page, what we can see that is in fact correct. What we've got is a wind out of 074 at 30 knots. And that's most of the settings. We'll get into how to fly procedures in another tutorial.